Hello, I'm Dr. Selena Benavides. I'm a developmental psychologist and also a college professor. And today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about racial disparities in society. My focus is going to be about the book that you are reading, When They Call You a Terrorist. In the first chapter alone, they cover many themes from poverty, race, job insecurity, food insecurity, housing, health, and discrimination. And although many of these themes are highlighted in the first chapter alone, we're going to be diving into a few of them and talking about the implications. So, to start, I wanted to go over intersectionality. The definition of this word is that intersectionality refers to the interconnected nature of social categorizations that apply to an individual or a group. So, an example could be that this may be in regards to someone's race or ethnicity, their class, their gender, their ability, their location that they're from. And a way you can think about it is, how do you identify? What are the factors that you would use to label yourself? And it's hard to tease these components apart. They're regarded as overlapping and interdependent. And it's important because when we're thinking about, for example, race, class, and gender, we have to think about the ways that they may lead to systems of discrimination or disadvantage for certain groups or individuals. And that begins with this first section on health disparities. A definition of a health disparity is a difference amongst people that is linked to a disparity in socioeconomic status, racial or ethnic background, cultural background, or environmental factors. Well, why is this important? It's because it leads to differences in death, contraction of diseases, and accessing resources and the preventable way of preventing a disease such as a screening. I'm not going to show this full clip, but there is this YouTube video that goes over this in further detail that talks about health equity. And it also illustrates the idea about those within a certain county living and having better health outcomes and living in better conditions than those in a nearby county. It's a great short clip that I would recommend, and it's called What is Health Equity? And I've included the link for you. Let's talk a little bit about life expectancy. Well, overall, the life expectancy of adults in the US has increased over time. So, for example, people were living about approximately 79 years of age in 2009. And when we compare this to 1929, the life expectancy then was only about 57 years of age. So, there's a big jump. People are living longer. But there's a gap. This isn't equal across groups. So, for example, if we narrow in on focusing on white females and males, as well as Black females and males, we see some differences. So in 2009, those who have the highest outcomes, the greatest indicators of longevity over time, are white females. Well, those with the lowest indicator of longevity over time are Black males. Now, interestingly enough, when we talk about a Black female, how long she is living in 2009 on average, the peak in comparison is what would be for a white female in 1979. We see something similar occurring with Black males. In 2009, the peak of which they might be living um, over time in 2009 is at what the lowest would have been for a white male in 1979. So things are not equal across groups. And why do we think this could be occurring? Well, if I were to ask you which of the following is the best predictor of one's health, and I gave you these different outcomes, whether or not you smoke, what you eat, whether or not you're wealthy, whether or not you have health insurance, or how often you exercise, you may be thinking that some of these might be weighing more of a factor than others. For example, when we're thinking about health, we tend to think about if you're engaging in risky behaviors, if you're consuming healthy foods, and you're getting your regular exercise. But the best indicator of whether someone will have good health or not is whether they're wealthy. So, wealth also plays a role in regards to housing opportunities and issues of concern that people have. In the US, a Fair Housing Act was put into place in 1968. The goal of it was to protect every person in the US from housing discrimination. This was huge because before this was in place, certain people were sometimes prevented from renting, buying, or receiving home insurance. These protections were put into place to make sure that landlords, real estate agents, and others couldn't discriminate based off of a racial profiling, for example. But we still find that housing discrimination is a common occurrence. And we may think that, no, this is something in the past. These kind of signs were something that are no longer present, but we do find that to still be the case. This is an example of a lawsuit that took place in 2014, which was not that long ago. And there have been other ones where we have found cases where a company or an individual was discriminating against others based off of their race or other factors. And now these last two pictures are showing that it's not just about race or ethnicity. Sometimes we see it about age. So unfair discrimination against individuals who are older or by ability level. Discrimination can occur in multiple ways. And so sometimes it's more direct and obvious, and other times it's more subtle. For example, it could be telling someone that a place is no longer available, but then renting it out to another individual or family because you didn't want that person to be living there. It could also be charging rent at a higher price for someone or insisting on a higher just security deposit than you would for another individual, or ignoring calls from prospective renters because they have an accent and thinking that you may be profiling them based off of what cultural group they may be a part of. Well, the reason why this is such an issue and it matters so much is because housing discrimination can lead to segregation, meaning people are living in congregated areas separate from each other, and it becomes harder for a neighborhood to become more diverse. It can prevent certain individuals from gaining upward mobility, so being able to move out of the certain class that they are part of and moving to a higher socioeconomic background. And it oftentimes leaves people without adequate and affordable housing. And now we're talking about housing discrimination. I wanted to dive a little bit further into discrimination. And let's begin with something that might be more familiar to you if you haven't experienced more overt discrimination before. There's a term called racial microaggressions. These are incessant but subtle racial assaults. The issue with them is that sometimes they're very brief, they happen in a common interaction with another individual, but there's some type of indignity against you. And it can be done intentionally, meaning the person is purposely trying to do this to make you feel uncomfortable or let you know your place. Or sometimes it's done unintentionally, but it still has an effect on you. A racial microaggression communicates something hostile, derogatory, or negative towards you or people like you. An example of one would be a put down about your race or ethnicity, or insinuating that you are other or you are different. Here's an example that someone has shared when they were being told that, no, where are you really from? What are you? You don't act like a normal Black person, you know? You don't speak Spanish. You're really pretty for a dark skinned girl. Can you hear the way that which these are implying something as other, or that someone is not good enough, or that they are different from the other people like them in their group? And these are slight interactions, but the problem with them is that even though they can seem harmless, it still weighs on the individual. It can lead to increases in self doubts, lower self confidence, and impact your ability to achieve your goals. And research has shown that it also impacts individuals in their academic achievement in school. And this is just the impact of microaggressions, so smaller levels of racial insults towards an individual. But now I want you to imagine what the discrimination is like when it's even greater and how that can impact someone. In chapter one, this was something that really stood out to me. This quote, but there is nowhere that they can be or feel safe. We try to make a world and tell them they are important and tell ourselves we are too, but real life can be an incessant and merciless intruder. Now, you may think this is something that's isolated to what was being shared in your book, but this is not the case. Black adults are about 5 times as likely as whites to say they've been stopped by police because of their race or ethnicity. And it's not just overt actions, but we can also say that Black people have reported feeling as if others are suspicious of them or have acted as if they were not smart, in comparison to other racial ethnic groups who have lower reports of these issues. And these are also issues that are being reported amongst white and Black officers. They also are aware of situations that are occurring that they feel that Black people are not being um, taken care of, valued, and treated with respect the same way as others. So when profiling and asking white and Black officers a series of questions about race and thinking about police interactions with individuals from different backgrounds, what were their thoughts? Well, 92% of white officers said that the country is treating Black people with equal rights, and only 6% said that they need to make changes. In comparison to Black officers, it was 69% who said that the country needs to make changes in how we're interacting and treating Black people. So this is clear that it's not just the average citizen that is saying this. Even within the police department, we're noticing differences in perception of how interactions are occurring and what kind of changes need to be made. So what does this mean? Well, let's talk about some implications for practice. And I have 5 things that I want to share with you. One, we have to realize that there's an ongoing history of disparities across groups, and it can be around race and ethnicity, which is what was covered in your book, but it can also be around their socioeconomic status. That's what the SES stands for. Your ability level, the location, meaning the neighborhood that you may be a part of, or other factors. We have to inform ourselves about these disparities and especially paying attention to differential crime rates in regards to who gets stopped more often for traffic incidences, who gets stopped more frequently to be assessed for examining their license plate or saying that it's a broken tail light, or other factors. We need to be aware of these situations because are certain groups being targeted more so than others? It's also to be important to be aware of these disparities because if we aren't aware of them, we can risk adding to them or perpetuating the disparities over time and not interrupting the cycle. We should also be reflecting on our own biases. And I just want to say we each have them. It's a common for a person to have some type of bias towards another individual or people about different things. But the first step is thinking about what judgments do we have already formed in our minds about others, and then try to work through why do we have that, and then trying to change our viewpoints. And thinking about this within the workplace, whether you're going into law enforcement, whether you're going into education or becoming a social worker or thinking about teaching, we should be thinking about how can we change the type of interactions we're having with individuals to be more positive. So we can talk about this with our colleagues and thinking about how can we better handle situations from individuals outside of our own group. And finally, we want to always make sure that we are advocating for others and trying to take action to create change. So that way we're not being passive in a situation, but thinking about the best way we can improve scenarios for all individuals included. And if you're interested and want more information, especially in regards to the criminal justice system or racial profiling that is occurring, I've shared some links to the American Bar Association as well as the Sentencing Project, where they cover some interesting articles that discuss the crime rates that have occurred, as well as who's being targeted for these instances. And if you'd like more information or anything I can share further, you can also contact your instructor, and I would be happy to provide more information to you directly. Thank you very much.